Hey everyone, it's me, David Chen. I'm here today with my buddy, Dan Gvozden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast to discuss the third episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Dan Gvozden, how goes it this morning?
It's early, but I'm ready to engage with you on this. I feel like I'm finally a part of this kind of midnight crowd for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is watch it as soon as it drops.
Did you do the midnight episodes for WandaVision, or did you kind of wait till the next day for WandaVision?
No, I can wait. I mean, I am hungry for this content, but not that hungry.
So I really enjoyed WandaVision overall. I thought the finale was rough, but like most of the show was pretty good. And this one, and so I like would wake up at dawn every Friday to watch that show. And this one, I thought, hey, let's continue that trend. Let's see what happens to watch this show every week and do this little YouTube show about it with you. So that's what we're doing here on this YouTube channel. Is we're talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 3. We're going to spoil everything through this week's episode entitled Power Broker. This is a YouTube only show. There's no podcast for those who are curious. And also, if you're looking for people who love the Falcon and the Winter Soldier to talk about how awesome the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is, this is not the show to watch. I recommend you just stop watch now. Go. There's like literally 10, 20, 30 shows you can find that are people just loving on this show. But this is not that show. We try to talk a little more critically about it. And also, case in point, Dan Gvozden, I think I don't like this show. I think I think that there's an outside chance that it might be a bad show. But I'm not going to, conclude that quite yet. However, I thought this episode was the episode of the show when it went straight into cartoon territory. Like I'm just like, I'm kind of it's kind of freeing because I'm kind of like, I don't need to take this seriously anymore. Like I don't need to. I thought this was like something that I could put. The Marvel movies have never been like ultra serious. They've always been fun. They're about people in colorful suits beating the crap out of each other. Uh, but I've always felt like they were like somewhat grounded in their own version of reality. And this is the episode where I'm like, they just don't care about any of that stuff. Like they just need to get a bunch of stuff done, and this episode's the vehicle to do it. This is profoundly silly and not a particularly good episode of television, and I think I don't like the show. What did you think of episode 3, Dan?
Wow, I was not expecting you to come in quite so hot on this one. I thought it was fun. I don't know. I mean, if that might be like faint praise, but maybe I'm not expecting quite so much out of it, or I don't know. I'm curious to kind of chart your experience. Having listened to your thoughts on WandaVision and now participating with you in Marvel kind of becoming a more sequential format. I've kind of seen you wrestle with that with WandaVision,
Uh huh.
and I can't speak to how the show is going to wrap up or the kind of like narrative arc of it. But for me, I think I'm, and I don't want to characterize your point of view, but for me, like I enjoyed the kind of simple thrills of this episode. I do agree with you; it's a bit silly at times. Like I feel like they want to pack in as much action as possible to keep things going. There's a point in this episode where they're like, every bounty hunter in the city is showing up at this random crates yard. And I was like, I don't really need this action. Like I was fine with the drama as unfolding, and that felt really silly to me. But overall, I enjoyed the colorful sights and characters, and continuation of plot threads already established in this episode. Yeah, I guess I just put it mildly. I'm more positive on this than you.
It's great. It's great. It's a good balance. It's good that we have balance. And also, like, I think it's more interesting that one of us likes it more than the other. Otherwise, it would be like just two people really enjoying something as opposed to arguing vehemently about it, which is
Sure.
maybe what this will be. And let me just be clear: there's nothing. There's a few things about the episode that were great. So let's start with the very opening of the episode. This ad for the Global Repatriation Council. This was awesome. Like, this is just really well done. The tone was perfect. The B-roll was great. And it's just slightly not hip enough that it's like something that a government would have made. Like, it's polished, but it's like not cool. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and
I was going to say only evil people use stock imagery. You know, like I'm sticking with my thoughts that the Global Repatriation Council is the power broker. Like I think these things are one and the same.
I think it's entirely possible. And yeah, the whole the mission of the organization is very logical, right? Like, they help people to kind of patch things up after the blip. But everything else about it is very dystopian, right? The sort of name, the Global Repatriation Council, and the tagline, reset, restore, rebuild. You know, it's a very... what do you mean when you say restore, reset, rebuild what? You know, reset to what? Restore what? So
make the pre-blip great again.
Make the pre-blip great again.
There you go.
So let's see. What we see Captain America for like a couple scenes this episode. The John Walker Captain America, right? Can you Walker us through the John Walker scenes this episode? What happens?
Well, I'm not going to continue that pun, but I appreciate it. Yes, he himself is working for the GRC. He comes out of this GRC van, and in a very, at least to me, seemed like a strange moment of characterization. John Walker is like breaking into the Flag Smashers, like I don't know if I want to call it a hideout. It was like a temporary shelter from last episode, and he's like screaming, "Do you know who I am?" And he's, you know, I think it's meant to draw the comparison that he's very not Captain America like. You know, this guy is a little unhinged and losing his cool, but he also seemed kind of like physically disoriented. And I had no idea what to make of that. It seemed like a weird bit of escalation of character. And I think that if there's one major dramatic flaw I found with this episode, it's that it seems to want to like, it does that whole thing of like characters becoming unhinged before the drama has earned them becoming unhinged about the situation. Like there's a moment later in the episode where Sam confronts Bucky and he's like, "This thing is driving you crazy," or whatever. And you're like, I don't really know that I buy that, but okay. I mean, did you pick up on this whole like disorientation thing from John Walker, or am I like overreading this?
So the John Walker thing, I think the show overall is suffering from, it is so sprawling and has so little time to do what it wants to do. It's just making all these shortcuts. Like, oh, John Walker is now super intense about his like we just found out who John Walker is last episode. Like and
he seemed like a nice guy.
He seemed like a nice guy. Now he's like busting into places in other countries. The thing about the John Walker thing that actually really struck me, and again, this is a thing where I was like between the Global Repatriation Council ad and then this scene, I was actually like kind of into this episode at first. Brief digression, by the way. People might ask, Dave Chen, why are you doing a show about Falcon and Winter Soldier if you don't like the show? Well, first of all, I did not know I would not like the show when I started. And
it only takes a little bit of time to find out for Dave Chen.
Yeah. But also like now I kind of wanted to experiment with like what would it be like if I did a YouTube broadcast after every week for like a show that a lot of people watched. So this is kind of an experiment, and if people hate this, then I'm not going to do it again, or I'll do it for a show that I actually like. But the thing is, I don't know if I'm going to like the show until I start watching it, and so often podcast shows, they're often leaps of faith, you see. So anyway, going back to the topic of the episode, I think what was interesting about this scene, it really emotionally struck me when he goes up to this guy and he's like, "Do you know who I am?" Because first of all, he's obviously very impotent, right? It's like a very impotent thing to say, because if the other guy knew who he was and it was meaningful to them, then they would be acting differently, right? Like, but it's a very impotent thing to say. And it felt to me, and it's a contrast, like you said, of like this new John Walker, Captain America, and Steve Rogers. But it also felt to me like a metaphor for America. Like America's standing in the world has fallen so much in the last X number of years that it's like being American used to be like a really meaningful thing that people aspired to. And it's very likely that we've lost a lot of that in the eyes of the world over the course of the last however many years. And it almost felt like, wow, is this show trying to say something about Captain America is embodying America's ideals in a way that is bad? Do you know who I am? Yeah, you're America. Anyway, I don't think the show really delves into that, but that's the thought I had when that guy spit in his face.
All I can think of when I hear the line, "Do you know who I am?" is Reese Witherspoon to a cop pulling her over on the side of the road.
Excellent.
But I do think the show has a little bit to say about that. I don't know if it's trying to like comment on, America today in the way that you're suggesting, but I do think that it's trying to kind of like suggest that these systems of power that we've established, wax and wane and may not be representing the people faithfully. I mean, that's like Zemo's whole thing is, you guys never even visited Sokovia after you destroyed it. And, but by the end of the episode, and we'll get to it, Sam's faith in the shield seems to be a bit shaken. And, as a plot beat in that ongoing plot line, I think a line like "Do you know who I am?" is interesting, in that like, yeah, we're not really sure who Captain America is at the moment, whether it's John Walker or Sam Wilson. The identity of the character seems very up in the air, to the point that like, yeah, people don't immediately recognize whether it's the symbol or the power figure or the symbol of optimism or freedom or whatever you want to call it, that Captain America used to represent. And so I don't know. I mean, it was a very choice line.
Yeah.
And it worked for me, even if I don't recognize what's going on with John Walker.
The answer, John, is we don't know who you are, and that's a problem with the show. But I think
I don't think it's a problem with the show. I think it's what the show's trying to say.
Is that we don't like he's a cipher. You think it's a feature, not a bug. That
Right.
It's not really clear. Okay. All right. Bold choice, Dan Gvozden. We'll see. We'll see if it plays out the way you want it to. Okay. Why don't we talk about the Bucky and Sam plotline this episode? Oh yeah. So there's a couple of things actually I wanted to mention about last time's episode that I neglected to mention. Right. One of the big moments from last episode was the reason that Bucky is so angry at Sam is because Sam gave up the shield like it was nothing, and he said something along the lines of, if you gave up the shield, maybe Cap was wrong about you, and if he was wrong about you, that means maybe he was wrong about me. I don't know if we talked about that line last episode.
No, I don't think we did.
Yeah, but that's kind of the whole thing. Is like Rogers is kind of this presence that looms really large over this whole series, and what Rogers wanted and what he didn't want, and so on. Whether Rogers was right about these people. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because Chris Evans had such a great presence in the movies. But I do think it's a challenge to kind of tie a lot of the character development to this character that's not even in the show. You know, like their relationship to this other character kind of defines who they are. And we'll see exactly how they evolve and, whether they're going to be more independent over the course of this series. So that's kind of what I'm keen to keep an eye on. In any case, end of last episode, they're like, we got to go get Zemo because we gotta stop these super soldier serums from getting into the wrong hands. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I think we had some confusion about that because it was like a very hastily delivered line that tied the connection between one plot and the other. But
Yeah.
I think here they lay it out pretty clearly that, Zemo was, he was out to stop, the super soldier serum proliferating, as we saw at the end of, a Winter Soldier, where he killed those, I believe it's 5 people that had
Yeah.
kind of been injected with the soldier serum, and he wanted to stop kind of like super powered people in general by dissolving the Avengers, as a bit of a revenge plot. Although that seems to be expanded upon in this episode considerably.
Say more about that.
Yeah, so when they go to meet Zemo, he like tries to reactivate Bucky's programming, and his whole thing, he's trying to make a point that like, and he makes it over a series of scenes that if the super soldier serum becomes proliferation, it's just kind of like an arms escalation, and and also that the idea of symbols are used to mask over the shortcomings of the characters that are utilizing them. And he says essentially that like Steve Rogers seems exceptional, but for every Steve Rogers there's a Red Skull. And what if the world was populated with Red Skulls, people that are using the super soldier serum but irresponsibly? So what we saw in Captain America Civil War seemed to be a kind of more hyper-specific version of him enacting a revenge plot because his family was killed in Sokovia. Turns out to be a more broad thing, that he's been hunting down people with the super soldier serum for a long time, as a part of a kind of like worldview to prevent the spread of super soldiers. And we get a big reveal that Zemo's not just some random guy. He's a baron. He's super rich. And it's interesting to see them kind of take this MCU character and slowly try to transform him into the comics version of Baron Zemo. And, because it's like what they did with the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, where it was all a fake out and he wasn't the character that people were expecting from the comics.
You're right.
Here, I think Zemo, too, was reduced in scale of like when it was originally imagined for Civil War, and here they're retconning, I think in a fairly naturalistic way, this character and broadening his scope, to operate as a bigger bad like he is in the comics.
Got it. Yeah. So first of all, at this point in the episode, I'm still really into it. Everything Zemo says is right. Like,
right.
Everything hashtag Zemo was right. He is. I'm like, quote, as he's talking, I'm like, I'm starting to like this guy. I'm like, this guy is like, he knows what's up about superheroes. So I'm like, why was this guy the villain again in Civil War? And I do think the expository dialogue is done pretty well when they're like, wait, you want to break this guy out of jail? And then Sam like literally explains all the terrible things that Zemo has done, because they don't want to just completely gloss over it, but they want to gloss over it a little bit. But he's like, you do remember this guy like murdered a ton of dudes and also framed you for murder and all these terrible things. And he's like, right. Yeah, but he's the only person that might know something about this super serum. I mean, we don't know if he knows anything, but like, we got to take a chance on it.
Yeah, it's a big chance.
It's a pretty big chance to let a mass murderer back out in unpredictable circumstances, because he might be able to help you find something. But whatever, like, that's cool. That I'm still willing to buy. That part of the episode, I'm still like, okay,
sure,
fine. And I actually thought the prison break sequence was really good.
I thought it was a lot of fun, and I like that we don't. It's already happened,
Right? That was pretty cool. Yeah,
it's like the end of Watchmen, where he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't have told. I'm not some Republic hero, or villain. I wouldn't have told you my plan unless it was already done."
I agree. Yeah, so that part was all awesome, and I'm digging it. And then, I mean, then he is able to access all of his cars and private jet. That's not really how wealth works. I just want people to know, like, if you are in jail, like, you can't just like go back to your old life without any incident.
Is there no more clear visual depiction of wealth than a guy with like a hangar full of cars? I mean, that is like the go-to depiction of wealth.
I agree. One day I aspire to have a hangar full of cars. Also, Zemo finds this mask, which, like, I don't remember. Did he wear this mask in Civil War?
No, but I know what you're about to get angry about. I feel like this is a continuation of your anger about characters expositing their comic book counterpart names randomly
Uh-huh.
without us understanding it. And here is a purple mask that he wears in the comics that nobody watching the show has any context for. And yet we're meant to buy into the value of him wearing this purple mask.
100%. Dan, damn, you know me so well. And then also, in addition to that, I think the mask is kind of like lame. Like it looks like a ski mask that's been spray painted purple. Is kind of what I could tell from it. Like at least Magneto's whole helmet had like a practical purpose to it. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what did you? Okay, so this is from the comics. So like, what did
Right.
you think of it? Tell me why this is awesome and Dave Chen is out of touch.
I mean, I can't really push back on you in that, in the very fact that like me explaining what you were going to say before you said it, it is a mea culpa that, like, as cool as I think it is to see him in this mask, I get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think that's why you have chosen to talk to me instead of any other nerd on the internet, because like I can acknowledge that. Like, I'm not going to put up a fight about it.
Well,
Um,
if you did put up a fight, no, I don't. I'm glad you can, but I'd also be okay if you did put up a fight with it, because then that would be something we fought about.
oh, sure, but
Um,
I'm not going to, except that to say like it's cool to see him in this mask. But I wish it meant something.
yeah.
And so like at its essence, I agree with you. And I hope, I do think that as these shows have gone on, we've said like, hey, what is up with that? Like, that didn't make much sense. And they're usually pretty good about then the next episode going, no, actually,
Actually,
this
he
thing
got
is
this
this.
mask like out of a house fire when his whole family died, and the blah blah. I mean, we actually know how his family died, if I recall correctly, but like, but they'll make up some kind of backstory for it. So maybe they'll explain it by the end of the series, Dan. Maybe they'll explain it by the end of the
I
series.
but I just to stay on the mask, because we're probably not going to get back to this later 'cause it's such a small nitpick, but like,
Well, he puts it on later. He puts it on
right,
later. So
right, and but takes it off within 30 seconds, and it's just it's such an example of what I described you describing, which is like, hey, I'm doing this just for the audience.
right.
Like, whose identity is he hiding
It's
himself
fan
from?
service that does not feel organic, that does not feel earned. What purpose is being served by him putting on the mat? Like, does it make him feel good? It's never explained. Anyway. So
Can I offer you some blue milk from Mos Eisley Cantina or whatever?
please.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway.
All right. So they get on the private jet. They talk at the private jet. Baron, for some reason, has Bucky's diary, and he's like, "Who is this Nakajima guy? This is one of the people you wronged, right?" And he's already playing the psychological games with him. They talk about what's in the diary. They mentioned Marvin Gaye. Apparently, Zemo has really refined. Zemo is woke, is what I'm trying to say. Zemo is woke.
I just thought it was interesting because he's not American, So like his comments about like the black community in America is interesting because he can look at it from like an outsider's perspective, and I thought that was for a global spy adventure, that also is, I think, and you can judge how effective you think it's being, trying to suggest something about, the black experience in America, and maybe like, black military experience in America, to have like someone from outside of America commenting on it, I think is kind of interesting.
So they are going to Madripoor. Dan Gvozden, tell us about Madripoor. Why is this significant?
Okay, well, Madripoor, the best way I could explain Madripoor is it's Mos Eisley in Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a den of scum and inequity.
Scum and Villainy, I believe.
Villainy, that's what I'm going for. Where did I get inequity from?
What kind of nerd are you, Dan?
I know. Scum and Villainy. I'm losing it here. There's even a bar in Hollywood called Scum and Villainy. Anyway, boy, I'm never going to live that down.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fired from the Hollywood Reporter for writing Star Wars articles now. So basically, it's like they say it in this episode, it's a pirate haven. What's interesting about it is a like a common haunt, yes, in Captain America comics, but also in X-Men comics. And even the kind of the bars that they go into are frequented from this. So the bar they go into in this is the Brass Monkey Saloon, but there is a shot of another bar in Madripoor, the Princess Bar, which is Wolverine's haunt in Madripoor. So, just to kind of chalk one up for another X-Men reference in these things. Dave, I'm going to say it now. I think this is going to be the show that introduces mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I mean, we've been burned in the past.
I am joking. That is no way true. But yeah, so Madripoor is basically like just a bad place, and it's where you go to get your underground dealings, and it's another one of those Marvel is the world outside your window, except for a few countries and locales that don't really exist, in the real world. But what I thought was really neat about this, and this is just again like a comics delight, is how accurately this was adapted from the comics. The visual style of it, the neon lights, the almost like Blade Runner aesthetic. Everybody's in like 80s punk getup, I guess is how I would describe it. And that's cool. And a lot of the heroes from the comics will go here with assumed identities. So most famous is Wolverine frequents Madripoor as a character named Patches, which is a really creative name. He just wears a patch over his eye and he does the Clark Kent Superman thing.
Yeah.
But he hangs out in the Princess Bar, as I said, which we get like a cutaway to, which is like, just there for a nod. I'm sure they'll revisit it at some point in 20 years. Even the character that Sam dresses up as is a character named Conrad Mack, who is also a character from the comics. Anyway, they're throwing in a bunch of Easter eggs, and for me, it was a thrill to see Madripoor visualized on the screen. And I felt like in terms of this episode and this series, it was a nice kind of visual distinction and getting the characters out of their element. I had a lot of fun spending time in Madripoor, at least.
I think the look of it is, in fact, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I also, just while you're talking now, I grabbed I grabbed an image of Conrad Mack by taking a picture of my computer screen, and I'm going to put it up in the thing. Do you think this looks like Anthony Mackie? This guy. I think it actually just is him. Is my sense. But I don't know 100%.
I don't see the image that you're sending me.
Yeah, so. I know. It's sorry. I put it on the screen in the chat so people can see it in the video. But I'll send it to you now via text as well. But I think it's meant to be somebody who looks extremely similar to him, if not him.
Right. Well, they say that he's like a little bit taller than Conrad Mack, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that. I think that just is Anthony Mackie, is it not?
If not, they found a really good Conrad, like Anthony Mackie lookalike.
Yeah, I would swear that was him, but anyway.
So Madripoor basically like a lot of comic book cool stuff in here that you delighted in when you were watching this.
Yeah, but I also thought in terms of the story itself, I had a good time seeing the characters there, forgetting all the comic book stuff. It was I'm a little bit confused about like some of the goings on there in this, but seeing they go to the bar, there's like a fun identity little thing, and then the conceit is that Bucky has to still pretend that he's under the Winter Soldier programming,
right?
And seeing him fight and the sound design I thought was really neat. They emphasize more of the kind of mechanical nature of Bucky's arm which is kind of the sound effect that, at least for me, is I link to memories of Captain America: Winter Soldier and his initial appearances there, where they really play up like how terrifying his mechanical arm is.
Right.
And I think, at least from a sound design perspective, they really brought me back to that old character in his kind of fakery of it.
People in chat, DN Williams says, was there anything specifically racist about Madripoor? I just always saw it as nothing more than a fictional Asian country like we have Latveria for Europe, Wakanda for Africa, etc. It is interesting to me that in the Marvel universe, right, the difference between Marvel and DC is the Marvel universe theoretically takes place on our world, like in the United
Correct,
States.
yeah.
And DC is like Gotham and Metropolis and whatever. And in Marvel, you have New York and LA and blah, blah, blah. But for non-US countries, you have the fake places in Marvel. You know what I'm saying? Like there's the Wakanda and the Sokovia and the Madripoor. And that is kind of on my radar. I'm like, is this just... Like, I think they do a decent job of making it seem very cosmopolitan and diverse in Madripoor. So it's not like it's supposed to be one specific country as far as I can tell, but it does feel very heavily inspired by like South Asian countries. Like I don't know.
I think it's explicitly coded as South Asian. I mean,
Yeah.
the very fact that I said like it looks like Blade Runner, I mean, that's designed, in that way. I mean, there are all those other countries do exist. Like we do go to Munich and
Right.
a bunch of other places. It's just there are like additional islands that aren't real. But you're right, it is interesting that they couldn't find some city in like the South Pacific or something instead of creating their own. But
so I'm curious, like what I want to know what the conversation was about. Like why don't they have real countries? And having a fake country really just it avoids the most of the conversation about like, are you exoticizing this place, or are you portraying this place in a bad way, or are you impacting the market for this product in the real country? You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's like, hey, Russia is launching nukes at us, and it's like, oh well, the movie's not going to do well in Russia. But if it's Sokovia, then it's different, right? So
I mean, Sokovia is interesting because it's made up exclusively for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's not a thing from the comics.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Whereas Madripoor it's like a 40-year-old creation by this point.
Right.
But then there's the additional conversation of like Daredevil operates in Hell's Kitchen, and the whole idea of it in the comics and even in the TV shows that Hell's Kitchen is a terrible place to be.
Right.
But Hell's Kitchen is wonderful now. Like it's very different than it was in the 70s and 80s. And
West Side Story, extremely problematic. I wonder how they're going to deal with all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Are they going to be Puerto Rican?
Right. Like, have you heard that song, like America? Like, I want to be in America. Like that song is really pretty tough to listen to today when its attitudes about Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rico is like not super progressive. Let's put it that way. So
yeah, I mean, it is interesting because like just to like a really quick thing here about like the Hell's Kitchen thing. Like in the Daredevil TV show, they were like, oh, Hell's Kitchen got destroyed in the first Avengers fight from the first Avengers movie, and that's why it's a terrible place. It doesn't have all these boutique, restaurants and stuff that you're used to from reality. So. Yeah. There are ways to hedge it, but when you do use real world things, you do come across that's like that the world changes,
right?
And your depiction of it might not really line up,
right? So with Madripoor, they can just control everything,
right?
I thought this part was cool, where he's pretending to be robot soldier still, and there was a moment when I was confused. I was like, wait, is he actually still under Zemo's control? But that's not the case. Zemo is just using it as a ruse to get to this Dr. Selby, right? Is that who it is?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if she's a doctor, but yeah.
this broker. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
the doctor comes later. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, David, it sounds like you're enjoying this episode so far.
Oh, it was literally great until this moment. when they meet this woman, and then everything completely went off the rails starting this scene. Okay.
That's
So
why I said it.
I'm like watching it. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm really starting to get into this show. And then everything went off the rails. Okay. So last episode, I brought up the movie MacGruber, one of my favorite movies of all time, as a parody of action movies, right? And I quoted from MacGruber. I'm like, oh, this scene from Falcon Winter Soldier is very similar to this scene from MacGruber that's making fun of this scene in movies. And I'm going to do the same thing again, because basically in the movie MacGruber, there's a arms deal going. They're trading money for codes or whatever the hell is going on in that movie. And MacGruber says to Kristen Wiig, like, hey, dress up like the guy who's the bad guy, right? Dress up like the bad guy. They're going to be so confused. And so she dresses up completely, like she dresses up like this dude with a beard and everything like that. Haas Bender, I think is his name. And she walks into this arms deal, and she kind of looks reasonably like this guy. And you expect like she might like get to the arms deal, and then they start talking, and then it breaks down. But literally, the second she walks in, somebody points at her and says, "It's not Haas! It's not Haas!" And then they start shooting at her, like literally, like half a second after she walks in. And so it's this kind of parody of like people realizing that you're not the person that you're pretending to be. And that moment basically happens this episode. Where first of all,
is this a case of like Walk Hard ruining musical biopics?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
First of all, it's amazing that Sam gets a call from his sister. Like, the other plot line literally is intruding on this plot. Like it's like this, and then they cut to her, and it's the color grading is all different. It's like a different location. It's like, hey, remember this plot that we're basically not even dealing with from a couple episodes ago? And I'm just like, what is this show doing? Like,
shouldn't he have turned his phone off?
First of all, yeah, maybe put that thing on Do Not Disturb, okay, to start with. Secondly, I thought we were, like, at least if the show dropped the sister storyline completely, I would have more respect for it that way, Dan, because in that scenario, it's like, hey, we tried the sister boat storyline. We're like, this is not working. We don't want to do this. But no, they still want to make it a thing, Dan. They still want to make it a thing. So then immediately the woman is like, it's not them, you know. It's almost from a Tommy Wiseau movie. It's like it's not them. They're faking, and it's like, and then literally a moment afterwards, I think Sharon Carter murders her. Right? That's what I get the sense happened?
Yeah. Or well, no, I don't think it's Sharon Carter. I think it's like another group. Well, maybe it's Sharon Carter. I know Sharon Carter at least saves them from this bounty that is put out on their heads.
That was my sense was that Sharon Carter was like somehow surveilling that entire situation in this room that's difficult to see in, recognized that they were in danger, and then murdered that woman at the exact time that they were about to get hurt. So anyway, yeah, it's so profound. The whole thing was so profoundly silly, and then it's like, Zemo's like, hey, I gotta get us out of here. Leave your weapons behind. It's like, what? Why that? And then his plan was, let's just literally run away. Like, I guess they had to leave the weapons behind because in order to get out of the club. But then we don't even see them leaving the club. So I think that was like a cut scene, was my sense.
I did appreciate Sam running and shouting, "I can't run in these heels."
Yeah, that was nice. Okay, so I've spent like 5 minutes complaining about the scene. You tell me why I'm wrong, Dan.
Oh no, I don't disagree. I thought this scene was messy, and the sister reappearing, it was like, I felt similar to you, which is like half of me was like, oh good, they remembered this, like they're not just gonna drop it, but the other half of me was like, not like this. This is not how you do this. Did you read these articles that came out since the first episode, where the showrunner had to fight for the sister and bank scenes, and the Marvel execs were like, we really don't want this in the show, and this was like a real sticking point for like the creatives on the show. They wanted to include this whole sister angle thing.
I didn't read this. Tell me more about this.
I mean, that's about as deep as I know, but I feel like you can feel that watching these episodes. It's like this should not be in this show, and I understand why you feel like it should be in the show, but it just does not fit. And again, I was hoping that it would, but its inclusion in this scene does not give me a lot of hope.
It is the most striking version of it's so discordant. It's like a metaphor for why it shouldn't be in the show. Like, because it's literally, oh, we're doing this whole Mission Impossible plotline where we pretend to be other people, and then literally they get a call that like messes with what they're. And it's just like, what? Like, if I wanted to say, hey, show creators, make a scene that demonstrates why this plotline should not be in the show, I could not have designed a better scene than this.
I mean, you could have her call about something even more random, like, "Hey, Sam, did you put that receipt from all that spoiled food that we sold? Where'd you put that? I need to do my taxes." It's the only way it could get more like, does this matter right now? I don't care about it.
It's so. And then I'm like, okay, maybe the show is trying to be ridiculous. That's kind of like where I landed on it. Was like, I'm like, okay, I thought this was like somewhat serious commentary on like American imperialism and stuff like that. But then like now it's just like, oh, you're just a cartoon. You're just like like not even as serious as like a John Wick movie, you know? And maybe that's where it's always supposed to be. But like, anyway, okay. So then they end up at Sharon's place. And can you remind me why Sharon had to give up her entire life?
Sure. So like Sharon, is in allegiance with Bucky and Cap in Civil War and helps them out in that. And they're seen as fugitives of the state. So if you don't remember, at the end of that movie, they had to flee to Wakanda, and they were there for I think a couple of years in continuity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just kind of like laying low, which is why their kind of reappearance in Infinity War when they're fighting against like Thanos's Black Order to save Wanda and Vision. That's like a big dramatic reveal. Like Captain America is back from hiding, and he's got a beard now. Which improvement. But she doesn't quite have the resources that Captain America had, so she had to flee. She's a fugitive of the state, so that's what had her end up in Madripoor.
Well, she's doing quite well for herself, Dan. I don't know if you know. She apparently sells extremely high value stolen art, is my sense, right?
Yeah, and I guess various other things. I don't know. Maybe Shield connections somehow get you into the art world. I don't really know. Nick Fury does not seem like a collector to me, but.
Well, it's funny. Bucky makes a statement like, "Hey, most of the art in the Louvre is fake. Like all the real stuff is like owned by rich people." And it's like, this is actually like a real thing. There was actually a real art scandal where like millions of dollars of art was sold to people under the guise that it was real, but it was actually fake. There's actually a documentary on Netflix about it. So I like that was like kind of a nod to real life. I don't know that most of the art in the Louvre is fake. I don't think that's true. But it is a real thing that like rich people buy art that is fake. Except in the real world, it's the rich people that get the fake stuff. Who knows? Maybe they do have the real stuff. So
I thought it was fine. And I, an interesting piece of world building. It immediately reminded me of the scene from Black Panther where they're in the art museum and talking about colonialism and things like that. And
yes,
yeah. Anyway,
so. Then they're like, hey, I know this guy named Nagel, right? Dr. Nagel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the person who's going to have the information you need. And also, by the way, these guys have been framed for the murder of that other woman. And so they go to see Nagel, and somehow the bounty hunters find them. That was the thing that I didn't understand, is like, how did everyone know that they were in this shipping port? I guess I'm just turning off my brain at this point,
You gotta, if you're an action movie, you've got to have your shipping crate scene. Like, I think immediately of what's the child soldier movie? Hannah has the shipping crate
Yeah.
scene. I mean, it's just like I don't know. There's like a big lot in Hollywood somewhere with a bunch of crates in it that everybody's renting out every other week. But here was another one of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought the bounty hunters, I didn't quite, I mean, they set it
So
up,
here's the
but
thing that's a shame of it is like Sharon Carter is a total badass. Like it
yeah,
is.
it looks great
It looks
too.
awesome. She looks awesome
Yeah.
doing it. It's just like she's taking out all these dudes. Love the overhead shots when you're fighting like multiple people. Like that's really cool. Like the choreography is like very good overall. But I'm just like, why are these bounty hunters? How did these bounty hunters find these people? And then, okay, so then there's a scene with the doctor, right? And it's kind of interesting, this idea, like what the show is taking the idea of the blip more seriously than any other MCU stuff has taken it, right? So he's working on this super soldier serum, and then he got blipped, and so he lost all of his work. But he came back, and the power broker is helping him to do the super soldier serum again. So that was basically what else is in this storyline that we think we should remember?
I mean, I think it's interesting at least that he said there's 20 serums, so like we know at least the extent of it, and that his whole goal was to like, I guess miniaturize the whole process. It doesn't need the giant machine that Steve needed to turn into Captain America. It's probably literally something you inject in your veins, which in the comics was a thing. There's also like a mutant version of this where you can give yourself mutant powers temporarily. But Carly has stolen 20 of them. We don't know how many she's used. We know at least 8. And they're clear about like reestablishing that here. Carly plus 7 others they've identified as already taking it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was this Nagel character is, I had mentioned last time we talked, Dave, the Isaiah character being experimented on, and it's a part of this show. And I don't think that Nagel is connected to him, other than the fact that it was his blood that was used by the CIA to recreate the super soldier serum, which ties into the torture and isolation that he talked about last episode.
Mm-hmm.
But in the comics, this doctor is the guy that experimented on Isaiah and the 300 other black soldiers after Captain America supposedly died. Now, this guy is clearly not that guy because he's like 35, unless he was frozen in ice too. He was not the one, and he explicitly says like that, he wasn't around, back then. So it does raise the question of like, who were the people that were able to reproduce the super soldier serum before enough to create Isaiah as the kind of new Captain America, so to speak. But I don't think that matters. It's the government did it or whatever. But anyway, the character is different than he is in the comics, but there's still a connection to Isaiah in an interesting way.
So Zemo then goes rogue and straight up murders this dude, right? Like in cold blood.
Yeah.
And weirdly, Falcon and Winter Soldier are cool with it. They're just like, okay, you murder that, but please never do it again. That's what they said. Like, please don't do that again. Like, that's super not cool, man. Okay. And I think the whole time I'm wondering to myself, what's Zemo gonna do when this is all over? Because I was stunned when Sam says, "Hey, man, get ready to go back into prison after all this." It's like, guys, does Zemo seem like the kind of guy who's gonna go, like, willingly go back to prison after this?
No, I mean, Zemo essentially escapes in this episode and then shows back up with a car. That's a level of confidence that suggests I'm not going back to prison.
It's just such a bummer when the audience is like ahead of the characters, like.
I mean, this is a guy that gets out of prison and he has a private jet all ready to go with his butler on it, serving him drinks. Like, this guy is not going back to a padded cell.
I completely agree, which is why, like, part of the devil's bargain they made was, hey, we're unleashing Zemo back onto the world, who, by the way, we know is a murderer. We've seen him murder people in the past, and he's murdering someone in this episode too. And it's just like the whole time I'm like, guys, like okay, yeah, the super serum's important, but like A, we don't even know what their freaking plan is, and B, is it really worth letting this murderer back out into the world? You know what I mean?
I don't know, Dave. That Nagel guy seemed pretty bad.
I mean, he was evil because they lit him in all this blue fluorescent and stuff, you know?
While his lab was exploding, which we haven't mentioned yet, that someone with a bazooka just straight up blows up the lab, conveniently. I thought for sure that like they kept cutting away to these cutaways of, which makes sense. These close-ups of these test tubes like rattling on the shelves.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure that like Sam or somebody was going to grab one.
Right.
Because like we forget that Sam still isn't a super soldier.
Yes.
At this point, you know, not that he needs to become one, but like, boy, that would be handy. I would think.
I agree, and it was weird to show all those close-ups and then nothing came of it, as far as we know. Maybe in the next episode. Okay, so they get away, like they drive away, and again, the dialogue at this point is just awful. Like there is a scene when they talk to Sharon Carter, and Sam's like, "Come back to the States for Sharon," and he's like, "As long as you get me that pardon you promised," and it's like, what the fuck? Like this is so dumb. Like this show's stupid.
I didn't react quite so strongly, but I appreciate your thoughts.
Like why? You remember in Inception when the guy what's the guy in Inception's name who he's like I can pardon you, you know, like I can pardon you for that murder of your wife. Ken Watanabe's character,
right,
plays that guy in Inception. Saito, right, and he's like, I just make one phone call and it's done. And it's like, well, at least in that movie, that's plausible. Like, because he's like a super rich dude, right? He's like a billionaire. Right. Sam literally cannot pay for his sister's boat.
Right, and he just broke Zemo out of prison.
He's got his own problems to worry about. Okay, anyway, whatever. So I'm like, okay, I just need to shut off my brain. And then the great part is Sharon Carter at the shipping site apparently gets into her friend's car and is like, hey, we got to deal with this situation. And it's like, Philip Rosenquist in the chat saying, why was it dumb? Explain yourself. I just did. The Sharon Carter gets in the car, and what my favorite part of that is her friend or her driver is literally just sitting there on the outskirts of the shipping site. Like all hell is breaking loose less than 100 yards away. And she's just kind of chilling there waiting for Sharon to be done. Oh, I hope Sharon's okay. I'm wondering what that driver's inner life was like, is what I'm saying, you know?
She just had them. It's like the scene from Die Hard where the guy's in the car with the music really loud.
Yes! That's exactly right. I mean, I think they're at the shipping site. I don't think it's like a completely thing like 3 miles away. I think it's like, it seemed like they were still there at the site. So I'm like, what was that person doing the entire time? You know, like just like sitting there hoping Sharon's okay. Anyway. Okay.
I would push back against you harder because like I thought it was fine. I mean, I think it's silly. I think a lot of the action beats of it are really silly. Like, you know, Zemo showing up in a car and he's just got the, you know, top rolled down and he randomly puts his mask on and stuff. It's a lot of kind of just like, we have to end this on a climax, you know, a climactic action scene for pacing, you know, and I think it establishes like what the characters owe to each other before they separate. And that all worked for me, but you're right. I mean, the flow of it is all over the place, and it's not the most elegantly done. But I don't think it destroyed it for me in the same way that it did for you. Although the friend thing really, I was like, what am I supposed to take away from this?
What friend thing? What are you referring to?
Her friend in the car. I'm like, is she working for some other like organization? Like what are like
Dante 5 Inferno in the chat says strongly suggesting that she is the power broker or working for the power broker. That's why.
Right. There's like some other like allegiance that's going on.
Yeah.
And that cuts against what you were just describing, which is like a not so elegant scene laying out their motivations and stakes only to be immediately subverted in a way that I'm not sure what we're expecting. And it's like one too many balls I have to juggle.
Yeah. DN Williams says Dave needs to start watching this like it's a Fast and Furious movie or he's going to have an aneurysm. I'm already there, DN Williams. I'm already there. Also, VV Edge in the chat says Argyle in the MCU. Sign me up. That's the character's name in Die Hard, who is chilling in the limo while all hell is breaking loose around them. So anyway, oh yeah, Mike V points something out. I feel like there's been at least 3 times where Sam has said out loud a meta line like, how did no one know about X plot detail all this time? Which is hilarious because it's like people are watching this and they'll be like, wait, they'll be thinking to themselves, how did no one know about this entire time? And so we need someone in the show to actually voice it, to kind of address it. But just because you have someone say it doesn't necessarily make it okay. Dan, what do you think of this?
I would normally agree with that, except that I do think they've reused it one too many times, but I did really like the explanation given by Negel here about like the blip happened, the program was abandoned.
Yeah, that was cool. That's cool.
I thought that was clever.
Because it nods towards like something like the blip happening, which by the way, people are comparing like the pandemic to the blip, right? Like our lives were kind of blipped for a year, many of us. Like we kind of had a year that's gone. And the idea of like what was interrupted at that time, like the show is acknowledging there was like weddings and funerals and work projects and scientific advancements, all of which like were gone because of this thing, right?
And I was injecting random people with things trying to turn them into super soldiers, and I had to put that down.
Yeah. So exactly right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. True that. Okay. So
double true.
Let's talk about the very end of this. So there's a couple things happening. Two things happening. I have a hard stop in 10 minutes, by the way. So, okay. We're trying to do this before work, basically. So the first thing is that we didn't talk about the Carly Morgenthau plotline, but there's an earlier scene where her mom dies. They shove in some character development.
I don't know that it's her mother. It's a character named Danya Madani.
Okay. Yep.
Who's like apparently a refugee that was of value to her. I'm not sure if there's a comics counterpart to this, although there's a real world counterpart to this, which when I Googled the name, I was like, oh, this person's like an actress. And so maybe they pulled that name from some relation. But, yeah. And Madani we watch her die and clearly has some value to Carly that we're yet to really establish.
So then she has like a little conversation with her partner. We find out a little bit more about her. She wanted to be a professor in the pre-blip times. And now that the lab has exploded, the secret lab that has all the power, that has all the serum in it, that people know that the lab, I mean, I don't think I can do this anymore. Anyway,
I don't even know what connection you're making.
Well, I'm just saying that she's talking with her partner, and her partner's like, "Hey, did you know that the lab with all the remaining serum is gone?" And it's like, "What? Like, was this lab like a?" It seemed like a pretty secret lab, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right. Like
yeah.
It was in containers and stuff like that. So it's like it seemed like new, but then it went from a secret lab to literally everyone knowing about it in like the span of 5 minutes in the show. So I'm just like, what is even, what's even happening here? Anyway, so the bottom line,
in the span of a cut, everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So then, the secret lab that was exploded and like, mostly destroyed. Anyway, I guess it makes sense that Carly would know that more super serum was produced there. Okay. So I'm being a little bit hard on the show. So then she says, well, now that we have the only serum left, the power broker has to deal with us, right? That's kind of the fundamental of the scene, right?
Right.
And that's basically it. Like Walker is investigating the Zemo breakout. What else? What else is going on?
Well, just to finish up the Flag Smashers thing, there is a moment where they break into the GRC building that they've been having this conversation outside of with GRC does not have great security considering the two biggest enemies of their organization are chilling without masks on out front of their building. But they break in, steal all these supplies, and there's a guy tied up, and Carly blows up the building, which is a shock to her partner. We're meant to basically take away that like she has turned violent in a way that the Flag Smasher cause did not initially intend to be.
Right.
And for me, like, interesting moment. It didn't really work because I don't really know what's behind that. I mean, I think it's that it seemed like her mentor died, and that maybe has hardened her heart. But without knowing what that relationship was about, it's hard for me to invest in why she made this turn.
Right. Good call out, Dan. Curious if we're gonna ever find that out. Curious if the show's ever gonna. The show has a lot of stuff it needs to do in the next 3 episodes. If it's gonna be good, in my opinion. but that's me speaking, and I know a lot of people love this thing, so I'm just kind of ranting from my little tiny perch here in this tiny YouTube channel. Okay, final shot of the episode. A character shows up. Ao, right? Is it how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I believe so. One of the Dora Milaje or Malai or whatever. I always mess up their names because I never heard it pronounced in reality before I read it on the comic book pages.
Yeah. And tell us who this character is, because I think a lot of people might be seeing this character. They might say, like, I vaguely recognize her, but they're in Sokovia. Bucky finds this character that I guess, like, this character is, like, tracking them somehow, right? And he cottons onto that. So
yeah. So, I mean, she's one of the top guards in, of the Black Panther or the royal family, and she shows up. And we've seen her before, I believe, in Captain America Civil War. She was protecting King T'Chaka of Wakanda. And so this at least, very least, ties in Wakanda into the story more directly, which I think makes sense considering Bucky's history in Wakanda, being deprogrammed there and spending time there, finding kind of like some inner peace.
He would like know all these people in Wakanda at this point, right? So
right, yeah, and Wakanda's kind of new resurgent onto the global,
right,
whatever I want to say,
global stage,
global stage, especially that it's advocating for, Black people and communities, like we saw at the end of Black Panther 1. So, I think the exciting thing about this is that there's not really been much of a follow-up on Black Panther, and there is a lot of, like, I guess, questions, with the death of Chadwick Boseman, like what world is going to look like, Wakanda is going to look like, and maybe we'll get some inferences here into what's going on with that part of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah. All right. Closing thoughts on the episode, Dan. And as you're talking about it, I'll just pop up that you can find Dan's work at amazingspidertalk.com. And if you want to support what I do, which I literally can't imagine why you would after watching this, patreon.com/Dave Chen's the place to do it. But Dan, any closing thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've kind of said it in our discussion, is I think the second half of this episode was a lot sloppier and rushed a lot of plot beats. And I think you're right in saying that this show has a lot to juggle. Or is juggling a lot and has a lot to wrap up. But an episode like this,
a self-imposed, by the way,
right?
It's not. It's creating all these new characters. Like, well, some of the characters are being created. I mean, most of the characters are from the comics, right? Like Carly Morgenthau, John Walker. These are most. But I mean, on some level, the show chose whoever is producing it, whoever is show running it, like chose these plot lines to take on. So
I think no more evident than the boat stuff with the sister. Like to me, that is the appendix. It's
the vestigial organ,
right? Yeah, and
which, by the way, we're not saying that could not be a good storyline. Like that,
it could be.
It could be. It could be even in the show, but it just is like it's barely been referenced in the last 2 episodes. So it's like, is this going to be meaningful? Is the big question, right?
Yeah, and for me, I think in terms of my overall thoughts, I think the core story of the show is still strong, and this episode reinforced what I liked about the last episode in terms of like getting deeper into the Captain America mythos and like delving into questions about Captain America's place in the world and who should be that character and Steve's legacy and things like that. And I do think they've set a pretty good stage here as we move forward for how all these pieces are interacting with each other. But there is some roughness around the edges, you know, when you encounter like characters that have less than 5 minutes of screen time, you know, that you're talking about the woman in the back of the bar or
Right.
you know, Sam's sister, that stuff. But to me, that stuff is just not important not necessarily. And maybe we should have avoided it, but I can look aside it because it doesn't seem core to the enjoyment and essence of the show.
Yeah, but then like, why include it? You know, like you could
Yeah,
have
no, I mean,
just
it's
had them
sloppy,
like
for sure.
encounter Sharon Carter some other way, but then they wouldn't have had a big shootout, right? And
Yeah.
anyway,
I do feel like they do seem kind of shackled to having to have big action sequences in this because it's not a 6 hour movie. They have to give you a little bit of that, and it's causing them to create artificial conflict that didn't necessarily need to be there.
well, Dan, I think that was extremely well put. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for watching this. You know, if you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that bell icon. You'll get notified whenever we broadcast live or upload a new video. And yeah, I appreciate you hanging on as a viewer, hanging on through this experiment with me of making a recap show on YouTube about a show that has been pretty rough for me so far. But who knows? Maybe they'll really start to turn it around next episode. We'll see. I don't know. But I also, you know, whenever I see the reviews about the show, like 99% of the tweets and the reviews and it's all rapturous. It's all like, this show is amazing, incredible. Oh my, Sharon Carter, blah blah blah, and it's like great. I'm happy for people. I'm here to represent a different view, and I got one tweet last week, Dad. Someone was like, "Hey, thanks, David, for kind of criticizing the show because like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with everyone saying that," and it's like. That's great. I'm glad for that. I represent literally 0.01% of the audience of this show, and I'm happy to represent that percentage. So
It's the internet, Dave.
what does that mean?
It's going to be polarizing. Like, you know, that people can't. A tweet does not allow you to discuss, I think, the true nuances of a phone call about a boat interrupting a scene.
But this YouTube live broadcast can. Anyway,
That's our bread and butter.
it's our bread and butter. I am David Chen. He's Dan Gvozden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. Thank you so much for watching.